Why USS Missouri is easily the most famous battleship of all time. With the Cold War over, Missouri decommissioned in March 1992. The cost of maintaining the battleships in service, which required large crews and specialized training, was simply too much for the Navy to bear. It was struck from the Navy list in 1995 in anticipation for conversion into a museum ship. Its sisters Wisconsin and Iowa remained on the Navy list until early 2006. The viability of returning the ships to service was debated for much of the 1990s and early 2000s. The Marine Corps argued that the battleships were necessary for the provision of amphibious gunfire support, a concern that the promise of the Zumwalt-class destroyers would only partially allay. The North Carolina and South Dakota class battleships were designed with the limits of the Washington Naval Treaty in mind. Although much more could be accomplished in 1938 with 35,000 tons than in 1921, sacrifices still had to be made. As had been practice in the first round of battleship construction, U.S. Navy architects accepted a low speed in return for heavy armor and armament. Consequently, both the South Dakotas and the North Carolinas had speeds a knot or two slower than most foreign contemporaries. The Montanas, the final battleship design authorized by the Navy, would also have had a 28-knot maximum speed. In any case, Japan's failure to ratify the 1936 London Naval Treaty bumped the maximum standard tonnage from 35 to 45,000, giving the designers some extra space to work with. The result was the Iowa class, the most powerful and best designed battleships ever built. USS Missouri, the third laid down but last completed of the Iowa class, carried a slightly heavier main armament than the South Dakotas and could make 5 extra knots. The Iowas were the first U.S. Navy battleships to make speed a primary value, and achieved the speed through a longer hull and more powerful machinery. Indeed, the Iowas are the fastest battleships ever built, outpacing even the Italian Littorios by a knot or two. While no Iowa ever recorded a speed higher than 31 knots, rumors over the years suggested that the battleships might be able to make 35 knots over short distances. Part of the rationale for building the Iowas was to have ships capable of chasing down and destroying the Japanese Kongo-class battle cruisers, themselves built in 1913, but the Navy also wanted to ensure that it had battleships capable of keeping up with the Essex-class carriers. Missouri's guns were also a step up from previous classes. The 16-inch/50 caliber could fire a heavier shell, at a longer range and with more penetrating power than the guns carried by the South Dakota class. Indeed, while the 18.1-inch guns of HMS Yamato launched a heavier shell, the 16-inch/50 calibers had more penetrating power and could fire at a slightly faster rate. On the downside, Missouri's great length and narrow beam, necessary for transit through the Panama Canal, made it a mediocre seaboat in heavy oceans. USS Missouri entered service in June 9.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you very much. Those beautiful Hawaiian traditional entertainment and a greeting. So good evening and aloha. Thanks for joining us, and thanks to all my fellow ministers and everyone else here present for joining us this week. After very productive sessions we've had today, we come together tonight on the deck of the USS Missouri. This battleship, right here, known as Mighty Mo, has a remarkable operational history in the Asia-Pacific and around the world. In service from the Second World War through the Gulf War, the Missouri earned 11 battle stars along the way as its crew helped defend the United States and its friends and its allies, and made a better world for all of us. Of course, it's most famous for being the site 71 years ago this month of the signing ceremony that ended World War II. Here, one-time belligerents came together to begin the healing process for a war-ravaged region. As the session concluded, General Douglas MacArthur, who presided over the ceremony, said, "Let us pray that peace be now restored to the world, and that God will preserve it always." Over the ensuing decades, Asia-Pacific nations and militaries have come together to ensure the security and to uphold the principles that have enabled every nation in the principles, like resolving disputes peacefully, ensuring countries can make their own choices, free from external coercion or intimidation, and preserving the freedom of overflight and navigation guaranteed by international law. And since 1967, ASEAN has been central to those efforts. The results have been extraordinary. Think about it. Economic miracle after economic miracle has occurred in this region. First Japan, then Taiwan, South Korea, Southeast Asia rose and prospered. And now, today, China and India are doing the same. And human, social, political, and security progress have been made with them. And we should all be proud of that progress. It's a credit to all of our nations, all of our peoples, and most relevant to those of us here at this meeting, to our militaries. But we cannot rest, for this region's changes, economic, political, and military, are providing opportunities and also challenges that are new for all our nations. And we must come together again to ensure that we meet them and to ensure that the region remains one where everyone can rise and prosper. Thanks to our productive discussions today, we're finding new ways for the United States and ASEAN to partner together. For example, on maritime security and countering violent extremism. Thanks to the work of our friends in ASEAN, we're meeting the commitment made by our national leaders at Sunnylands and at the 4th US-ASEAN Summit in Laos earlier this month to strengthen cooperation on the 6 shared security challenges. And thanks to gatherings like this one, we're catalyzing a principled and inclusive security network, working together to ensure the Asia-Pacific security, stability, and prosperity for decades to come. Tonight's dinner on the USS Missouri will not be nearly as historic as the events that transpired on our deck 71 years ago. But those in the future will look back tonight and say that we strengthened this day and this week, and the network that we strengthened, partnerships we developed with ASEAN, within ASEAN, on days like this. All that together will make a difference. For the United States, ASEAN, and the Asia-Pacific's principled and inclusive security network will provide the stability and the security that will help ensure another era of historic change in the region also becomes one of historic progress, and that this region remains one where every nation can rise and prosper for decades to come. As we complete this important and productive session, therefore, I want to reaffirm General MacArthur's prayer from 71 years ago, and to propose a toast to each of you and your militaries, and to continued U.S.-ASEAN defense cooperation and the security network that we're building into another 7 decades